energy field research, electrocrystals, all sorts of inventions. He's dabbled in Kirlian photography, and basically, I think you're going to be intrigued by some of what we're going to hear about tonight. We're pushing the frontiers of science here, but we're really looking forward to this. So please give a big hand to Harry Oldfield.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to thank Andy and all the organisers, and also the high-tech guys in the front and behind the scenes there. Without them, I wouldn't be having a lecture tonight. They've rescued the hard disks and all the wonderful, magical things they do. I just want to say it is great being here with this evening in this wonderful, ancient and holy and mysterious town of Glastonbury. It's my first time. I think I am overdue at my age to visit here, but better late than never. And first thing I want to talk to you about is, first of all, to begin with a little apology to you all, sincerely. And it's this, because I'm going to try this evening to squeeze about 35 years of research into about, how long? An hour and a half. Thank you. I've only just found out how long I'll have. Okay. My students don't call me the nutty professor for nothing, and by the end of the presentation, you're all going to be in agreement, I'm sure. Okay. So we'll start a little bit at the beginning, just to give you some background on literature, just to find out the laser's working here. My first work with another great, a wonderful researcher called Roger Coghill, The Dark Side of the Brain, and where we started to introduce Kirlian photography into this country for the first time, and my other invention, electrocrystal therapy. Kirlian photography was not my invention. It is not my invention. It came from the Ukraine, as it is now, and it was by Semyon and Valentin Kirlian. And I first got to know about them in a wonderful book called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain by Ostrander and Schroeder. It was published by Abacus Books. I still believe it is available on the internet if you want to do any real background into how all this was sparked off. It's a book well worth reading. And that's above my own book here, by the way. Okay. Thank you. And another book that was a biography written of me and my work by Jane and Grant Solomon, Harry Oldfield's Invisible Universe. Out of print now, but still available on the internet, Amazons and all those other wonderful jungles where my book can be found. Okay. A few different articles in national newspapers and things over the years. But just to show you, I have been around a long time. And to prove it to you, I can tell you this story. 2006, I was in America, and they were giving me some kind of very nice, prestigious award, by the way, there. And I had after my presentation, I had a young lady running after me down the corridor saying, Dr. Oldfield, can you hang up a minute? I just want to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind. And I did. And she said, my mother wants to know, are you the Harry Oldfield or his son? And of course, I was feeling very flattered, you know, this young lady, teenager, you know. And I said, well, actually, you know, I am the Harry Oldfield, and my son is named Anthony, and he's sort of like 20-odd years old. And then she stopped me, and my bubble burst, and she said, it's just that my mother said, by now, you are so old, you're probably dead. And it's the son I was going to see. So I just wanted to prove to her, to my mother, that you're still alive. So, absolutely true. And some of my early research actually began before that date, but 1972, the Kirlian photography. Semyon and Valentin produced a beautiful method of making electrical pictures using corona discharge around living things and non-living things. And the wonderful thing about living things, ladies and gentlemen, is they gave off a wonderful, vibrant energy field. The inanimate object did not, unless it was like a coin or a cross that had been influenced with healing energy. And this was an artist, I call this the, for those old enough to remember the ad, the Ready Breck man. Okay, the wonderful golden glow. The artist's impression is very good, but I have to tell you, in reality, and this evening you'll be seeing the reality of it, the artist's impression is a shadow of what the living energy field around a human being and all other living things are in reality. This was one of the first Kirlian pictures in colour I took of my thumb. No members of the local constabulary here, I hope. Good, good. I'm still incognito. Right, okay. And this is actually the corona discharge and the energy. There's no lens or focal plane in a Kirlian camera. There's a moisture screen above the film, and there's an electronic plate, and an electromagnetic field is passed around it. I'll be showing you the setup for those of you I know in Glastonbury who dabble. I'll show you how to do it. And it's in my books, of course. Thank you. And here's the apparatus. We have here, ladies and gentlemen, inside there, a modified Tesla coil, which is a pulsed high-frequency coil. Here we have a DC power source so that there is no fluctuations from mains frequency or interference coming down the wiring. And here in these early days, my design of a function generator that had pulse ranges of very below and beyond human frequency ranges of ears, but these were electromagnetic field pulses with different waveforms. And we sent this pulsed high frequency, high voltage into something like a leaf, which was earthed, and this is the plate, this is reflective dielectric covering, and that reflected all the light back to the film, which was underneath the object to be photographed. Of course, when people put their fingers and hands on it, they didn't need to be earthed, unless they liked wires attached to them, of course, and then we obliged, of course. That goes down rather well in America, where certain electrocution methods are still used for capital punishment. But it's wasted here. I'll remember that, not to do it again. And here, right, I know in Glastonbury you're interested in the paranormal and ghosts and phantoms. Because when I was an ordinary reductionist thinking young man in my early days of learning about science, we didn't entertain such things. But over the years, my mind has changed. And it began with looking at a leaf. Okay, can you see this leaf here? It's a Canadian maple leaf, but it's not all there. If you look very carefully, ladies and gentlemen, from here to there is no physical leaf. It's a phantom energy picture. Okay? And Roger and I came up with a term long before string theory in physics for a subatomic energetic matrix on which these physical molecules for everything around people, the universe, trees, stones, you name it, on which these physical molecules are strung. Okay? And it's this organizing field. Okay, morphogenic field resonance as well has been brought forward by people, various researchers and other things, of course, which I give due credit to. Thank you. Now, I wasn't satisfied with that partial phantom. What would happen if you took the whole leaf away? Well, I tried that and there was nothing left. So I left a central stem of vital force, okay, and ripped off all the leaves, which were there. That's the control, by the way, on the left, what it was like before I ripped off all the leaves. The leaves, the secret for a good phantom, 100%, is they have to be burned, okay? Just like in India, you know, the physical remnants of this space-time are burned, and therefore the energetic process is released and carries on instantly. The other thing to mention is the plant has to be, for this 100%, organically grown. If it's seeing chemical fertilization, any time in its growing life period, you will only get partial phantoms. As we discovered in the 1970s, before organic farming was popular. Here, by the way, I started to grow organic cabbages. And as there's farmers and growers here, this part of the country, I hope. At least with the apples and cider, at least, I hope. And one of the scourges of the organic gardener is the cabbage white caterpillar. Okay? Now, the reason why I'm maligning it, ladies and gentlemen, so much, is because of what I did a few seconds later. Please show the ghastly deed. A very painless injection of potassium cyanide, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a good point at this stage to announce that I also do children's parties and weddings, and Andy will be taking bookings after the presentation, or Martin down there. We'll see. And no, don't do this at home, ladies and gentlemen. I am an expert. Okay, as my dad used to say, an X is something that was, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. And so after this injection, you can see that the life force was put out. It was just like putting a hose on a bonfire. Light went out. There's fallout from the creature, but that creature, I assure you, is quite dead. And that's the before, just to remind you, and the after. And the reason why I put healthy there is because it had a last meal of my organic cabbages. And they were beautiful, just done with a knob of butter. They were gorgeous, you know. So he died very happy. I even put the butter on for him, you know. So, anyway, thank you. And here's some of that organic material, the organic cabbage. Okay, beautiful. It's not a galaxy in some thing taken from the Hubble telescopes, taken in the early 1970s with this discovery. But you can do terrible things to an organic piece of material too, especially if you put it in a pressure cooker or stew it from hours and hours. How many of you of my generation remember school dinners? And you'd walk through the school gate and you could smell what you were going to be having for lunch, because it'd been cooking from about 7 o'clock in the morning. Don't overcook your vegetables, ladies and gentlemen, because it takes out the life force. And this vitality, we also proved, is transferred to a human subject or an animal subject who eats the organic material. These aren't some supernova suns in a distant galaxy. They are organic oranges with the energy field around them in Kirlian. Thank you. Here we have an organic clove of garlic, and it was so energetic, ladies and gentlemen, with this effervescence of energy. It was even sending out, well, I didn't know what they were in those days, but almost orb-like structures right across the photography plate, several centimeters. Now, I was approached when I was giving a presentation for Association for Health for the New Age by Marcus Corzens in the 1970s. Little did I know, in the audience, just like tonight, there could be researchers and things, there was a young researcher called Glenn Ryan, and he was from the local hospital. And he said to me, I'm doing research on cancer cells and on some cancer subjects. Instead of doing all this organic photography, would you like to take on a little research project with me on photographing people with cancer and also the cells growing in culture that I do? So without hesitation, you can imagine a biology teacher, as I was at that time, given the opportunity for this kind of frontline research. I, went and visited him at his laboratory, and we didn't finish the first session of work till 4 o'clock in the morning. My ex-wife wondered where I was. In fact, she probably still wonders where I am, but that's another story. Well, coming back to the picture, ladies and gentlemen, here, in a healthy person, this is fingertips, right? We've got lovely, organized packets of energy. Okay, my laser's failing a little bit. It can happen at my time of life. I'll switch lasers in a moment. And here, though, the cancer subject, there's chaos. There's more energy, but it's not in organized packets. It's the life force gone rampant, ladies and gentlemen. Because, cancer, obviously is associated with a very vigorous form of life, but it's not organized. It's like a rebellion that's gone wrong. Okay, next one. But we weren't satisfied with just that. We were able to get hold of biopsy material from, this case, malignant breast tumor, and isolate from the center of the tumor And the surgeons at the hospital also used to take what a safe surround in their excision of the cancer site. So there's normal cells as well. And Glenn Ryan checked under the microscope. This was normal tissue, exactly the same size, exactly the same thing. But the malignant tissue, right at the center of the tumor, was so effervescent, I could look at the top of it, and it was like looking down a miniature volcano as far as the energy was concerned of the cancer. When I looked down the tube of the normal cells, the normal tissue, they were quiet, doing the thing they all do, is just living their own normal life force and working away in the background. The cancer once was so exuberant, it escaped the thick rim of the test tube there, the energy. And this is a theory worked out, Glenn and myself, of how sometimes cancer can transmit from cell to cell or tissue to tissue. It's called, actually, an old theory, mitogenic radiation, if you ever want to look that up on the internet. Thank you. We also got whole tumors, ladies and gentlemen, and these are called TS sections, cross sections, okay? And this is a benign tumor, okay? And it had an outside layer that was alive, that grew, but the center part had necrotized. That means it had died off in the center, and it gave off an energy field that was quite vigorous. But one thing about the tumor, this tumor, if it broke off bits of it and circulated in the bloodstream, it wouldn't seed, it would not grow anymore anywhere else. If it carried on growing in someone's brain or in their liver or something, it could still kill you. Benign doesn't mean good in this case. But here, with this malignancy, it was a very strong-going malignant carcinoma, and bits of this could break off, and you can see it's alive with energy all the way through. There's no black area or dead area. And some of these particular tumors and cells like very low, high CO2 contents, tension, and very low oxygen. And this is why in some natural cancer therapies they encourage the movement of oxygen and hyperoxygenated things through the body, especially the GI tract. These are what I like to thank my workers in America who supplied me. Dr. Thelma Moss in particular did this study in the late 1970s with rats. Okay, and here there was only the rats were photographed, but here we had rats that had cancer in their bodies, not in their tails, but in their bodies, and here we had a healthy rat. And sometimes you could screen to see if any rats, you could mix them up, and you would always pick out the rats that had any cancer growing in their bodies, just as we saw with the human fingertips. So Glenn and I, Dr. Ryan and I, were thinking marvelous things that we wanted to make this into a kind of a mass screening thing, coding photography for cancer. This is going back to the 1970s. That particular project, I won't say by what and by who, was quashed because, and the excuse was the ethical committee, it was not drug-based, therefore it was unethical. The ethics are still the same today, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So I was pretty dismayed by this, and I'd left teaching by then, and I was working as much as I could in the hospital with the research work. And after, viewing my views, I was frog-marched out the door one day of this hospital by security. And probably the best thing they ever did to me, throwing out the hospital, because I'd just be a glorified technician there now if they kept me. And I went on to say, I think I can do something better. And the reason I will tell you that is it's very pretentious of me to say that at the time, because I'd watched the healing hands action on cancer cells of a wonderful healer. His name was Matthew Manning. Matthew Manning, back in the 1970s. And what he did was not kill the cancer cells growing in culture. There was no animals involved, just cells growing. He stopped them from dividing by inhibiting certain enzymes that were very important for the mitosis, the division of the cells. And he stopped it dead. Didn't kill the cancer cells, because he said to Glenn, he said, if I've got an energy that could kill cancer cells, someone or any healer could have an energy that could kill normal cells, and we can't do that. It's not our intent to do that. And I thought, my goodness, if we could put him in a machine, a healing machine, or a bottle, what wonders could we do for humanity? Anyway, Matthew declined. And so I went on, also with help from Glenn in the early days, to invent something from Kirlian called ESM, which is the three-dimensional way of scanning the body and looking at the energy field invisibly with sound level meters and things, putting around a three-dimensional field. And the other method I did about 1978-79 was electrocrystal therapy, where I really did put healers in a bottle, or in this case, a tube. And they're called gemstones and crystals, ladies and gentlemen. And they are ancient healers that have been with us in our society since our hunter-gatherer days, perhaps even with the Neanderthals, because they wore certain things as well, as archaeology is now proving. Thank you. And this is the tube. Oh, my word. I think I've run out of power there. Oh, no, I haven't. Right. I've changed colour, ladies, from red to green. No comments, okay. I've gone green, as I've always threatened to do. Okay, and here are all the colours of the chakras, but all these stones have healing properties associated with them. And today, in our instruments, we have a variety of the rainbow there, and crystals associated with healing, including in the smaller version tubes. We found out that in those days that size wasn't everything, so we scaled down my healing tubes to a reasonable level of handling. And speaking of some of my first experimentees, this is my own son, 2.5 years old, and he learnt to do his letters on this portable machine here, A, B, C, D, and all the numbers, 0 to 10. And Daddy, I've got a headache, bang my head, I burnt my knee, you know, right, A5 on the knee, son, A10 on the head, and he would sit diligently in my chair until all the pain went away. And I was really chuffed over this. He said, but Dad, came home from school one day, why is it I don't need things like Calpol, like the other children ask at school from the nursery teacher? I said, because you've got your machine. And then later on, they had a question and answer thing where, what did their fathers and mothers do for a living? And I sort of quizzed him. I said, I understand you had a bit of an interesting day of discussion. He said, yes, Daddy. I told my class and the teachers and the headmistress that my daddy is a scientist. Oh, all right. He said, yes, if I told them if you were an electrocrystal therapist, they'd think me a bit funny, wouldn't they? 5 years old and already as sharp as a whip. Oh, just got a 1-1 at university recently. I'm really, really pleased. Told him, he rang me up, he said, I've got a 1-1, Dad, BSc honours. I said, that's right, son, I expected that. How did you figure that out? He said, well, I said, you inherited my brain, my boy, and your mother's good looks, and with that, you'll go anywhere. Okay, that's my son, now 25 years old. And a finer example of humanity you will not see, and very fit, and because of the product of all these things, healing things you see before you. Thank you. And here, we don't just work on human beings, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'll just guide you around this picture. This is going to be a video of a Great Dane dog we met in America called Venus. And Venus had a problem with hips, and I looked at this in my scanner. This is different to the Kirlian photography now. I am now able to see with video footage the living energy field around any living thing, and other things as well. And here, from her hip, there was an escaping energy, which we often associate with animals with hip dysplasia. And that was the energy block that was causing it. There it is, the energy block on her base chakra. Yes, animals have chakras as well, ladies and gentlemen. And she had a block there. So it was my job when I saw that, and Dr. Brian Daly was my witness to this, he was there, my American researcher, you'll be seeing more of him in a minute. And I asked the owners if I could put my crystals on her. And a few minutes later, the energy block and the leak, the block dispersed and the leak stopped. Now, this poor animal lounged around on the couch for hours at a time and got off the couch tentatively and hobbled across to the garden. It was a sad sight to see. But after this, she leapt off the couch, ladies and gentlemen, and made a very nice bounding way to the female owner, who burst into tears at the sight. So I was really pleased to be able to help Venus. And there are no placebo effects, ladies and gentlemen, for the critics out there on animals. Okay, there are no placebo effects. That's the before, that's the after. Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, where I had that patient. Yes, remember. I would sing for you. Covent Garden wanted me tonight, and I told them I was busy, I was going to be here with you, but I could not upstage that beautiful choir, wonderful voices of harmony, to put you off with my voice. Okay, now here, speaking of voices, this young lady was losing her voice because of a very, very nasty salivary gland that was swelling up, very resistant to antibiotics, and this energy here from her throat chakra is tracking down here to her throat and stopping her from almost talking. And here, after a couple of electro-crystal sessions and healings, the throat chakra is cleared and the salivary gland went down, and she had given up the antibiotics long before that because they weren't working. Resistant bacteria. Thank you, Evie. And in another way I was able to get healing energy from the crystals was vibrating them in an electromagnetic field and putting mics around to see if they were giving off any audible sounds. And I believe this is... here we are. I call this track unofficially my whale songs, because this is what it reminds me of. And this particular track has a wonderful, tranquil, peaceful aids meditation, restful sleep, and has even been known to put screaming babies to sleep. Although I can't guarantee that for all the mums and dads out there. There are also other tracks on there that are very invigorating and balancing for the chakras. And people say, well, how do you control the power of this this device? I said, simple, your volume control on your hi-fi or your MP3, I once got a very interesting call from Germany, and the lady said, oh, Harry Oldfield, your CD is wonderful. I said, well, thank you very much, meine Dame. I said, how do you use it? She said, well, it is wonderful. My family hate music, but I played it in the house just to annoy them really loud. And the house ghost, the poltergeist we had in the house, has now vanished, has gone. What do you think of this, mein Heilpraktiker, Harry? And I said, well, obviously, the ghost has no taste in good music. And she hung up on me. I don't think she quite understood that it was a joke. And show you the effects on people, and I had a lovely model here at this time, and still do, my wonderful partner, Ed. And she's also managing director of my company, and she gets me to places on time, and this is across the world I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, because I can sometimes be on another planet with all the stuff I do. I think you've already guessed that, haven't you? But here, this is what she was like, losing energy from the side of her face before the crystals, and after listening to that was what happened to the auric field afterwards. And later, when we got back from the United States, the British dentist diagnosed a deep-seated abscess, which the crystals kept in control before she got it seen to. In fact, when he looked inside, I don't think there was much left, was there, Eddie? No. So that was rather good. So that's the before and the after. Of course, all I'm promoting with the CD is good sounds and good music, not claiming anything else. It's wonderful that I still get a Christmas card from the sole member of my fan club. You have to listen carefully. Yes, you do. Okay. Now, speaking of sound and healing, this is the seismograph PIP monitored research we did together with John Reed and his wonderful instrument, the seismograph. And here is our crystal sounds and the beautiful shapes and patterns they make as the crystal sounds were playing that you heard earlier. And this is the screen we were monitoring, and these are all the shapes. And these patterns, ladies and gentlemen, mean something. And when the pitch was changed, we got rotational things. And there were also patterns, there's not a lot of time to show you tonight, there's also patterns that look like mandalas and things. Incredible. In fact, this is one actually. I'm glad we included it. And if you look at some of the Tibetan and Indian mandalas, they are very similar. And they are impressions of standing waves of energy, standing waves of sound, electromagnetism, standing waves. Thank you, Evan. Thank you. Now, this is PIP. This is the material, the invention that I made for observing wonderful patients like my dog, Venus, in America. And I went back to 1987 when I first was able to make my first PIP picture. I remember it was in my garden shed with an old computer called the Acorn Archimedes, which was the first 32-bit RISC computer. I still have it somewhere. I'm in love with that computer. It stopped working ages ago. No one will repair it. Just putting it out there for anybody. But yeah, never left the garden shed for 24 hours, peed in the garden and things like that. Oh, probably that's too much information for the ladies. I sometimes forget where I am, you know. But anyway, here is PIP. Not P, but PIP. Thank you. No, it's not. It's just to remind you, forgetting my own presentation, just to remind you what the phantom leaf looked like, okay? Now, transfer that to a human being, okay? I believe, from what I've been able to observe and research over the years, and I'm being serious now, that man and woman are more than their physical parts. They are a mental, psychic creature, but also spiritual. And this is all integrated in us and balanced. And there are different layers and clothing of energy, okay? And although mind decides to function through brain, mind, we believe, can work independent of the physical brain. OBEs, people under anesthetics with near-death experiences, which I've had personally too, I'll be telling you about that. Your mind can function independent of body and brain. And if you take away all the body, and you're never to return, then you have something classically there all the way through folklore of all human history. And these are phantasms, ghosts, spirits, etc. And here we had a volunteer of a young man who lost his arm in an automobile accident. But he said, sometimes, Harry, you know, I can feel my fingers moving. I know if an object goes through. My wife has blindfolded me and has tickled my invisible hand and fingers with a feather, and I've detected it. I said, when you're feeling like you want to be tickled again, come and see me. I said, I'll tickle you with something called PIP, polycontrast interference photography, and we'll see your invisible arm, I hope. I've done it with leaves, you know. And he looked at me most peculiarly. Have you indeed? We'll see. So he turned up a bit skeptical, and I said, can you feel your arm and hand now? He said, yes. Then I took the picture. There's the side view profile of his body, back and front. There's the stump, okay, the end of his physical arm. Here is the energy field right down to a missing thumb. Knuckles, and there's the shape of the hand, etc. And you can even see the tailoring of a wrist. Fantastic. We have repeated these experiments as well on other volunteers. Fingers and toes, and here we go. Yes, indeed. Now, the astonishing look here on this Qigong master, you heard the term eye-popping. It's because for the first time in his own body, we are showing him the chakras and meridian flows that he was taught as a young boy by his master in China, mainland China. And this is what he was looking at. Here are the classic meridian flows that flow down the arms. Okay? The chakras are here, throat chakra, heart chakra, and here is the solar plexus. And it was absolutely wonderful. I believe, hold visiting professor of medicine status in mainland China still at a few Chinese hospitals because I went to China and trained these barefoot doctors. They do wear shoes, by the way. I was most disappointed in that. But what they do is they go back to their communities once they've been trained in medicine to work for their local communities, their local villages, their local townships. And I was privileged, really privileged, all these young enthusiastic faces to teach them how to use this diagnostic system in the field. Thank you. And another thing it can do here is also pick up not almost perfect fields like the Qigong master, but the diseased energy fields of people like with angina pectoris, where the heart chakra is completely blocked. And let's put a ring around the heart of negative energy, for example. I teach the system of diagnosis of this energy all over the world, by the way. So it's something that is repeatable with other researchers. And here we have a young lady in perfectly good health, lovely strong meridians there going down her forearm. But if somebody should get, like this case, this is not swine flu, but influenza virus, all those meridians are disrupted. I did try ringing the NHS helpline when I got a sniffle the other day. All I got was crackling on the line. Okay. Yes, I know, that was a real swine, wasn't it? I do apologise. And making a real pig of myself here. And here we have the early stage, before I show you anything negative, I always like to lighten things a bit, of a benign breast tumour. And we saw this ring of energy. For the young men in the audience, I should explain that this is a brassiere strap, okay, to orientate you around the picture. And there is the top of the breast. Here we have an energy field. And I recognized this before. I'd seen it in the hospitals a few times. And I told the young lady that she should be tested out by seeing her practitioner and get a referral to hospital, maybe for a mammogram. And she went to a practitioner, GP, and he told her, sorry, I can't palpitate it, and I cannot find or feel anything. You're a completely healthy young woman. And she went back, and we still saw it growing, okay, the energy field disturbance. And I told her to go back again. And she made such a nuisance, so she gave her the mammogram, and it was found just a few millimeters across a benign tumour growing. And it's one of the smallest they'd ever detected at this particular hospital. But we had detected it a good over 2 or 3 centimeters across of the disturbed energy field effect. And anything physical in the body or this universe happens in energy first. Nothing can happen without energy transfer. Quantum physics, when you listen to my friend and colleague Dr. Mangia Samantha Lawton, tomorrow, I hope some of you will be at a lecture, Punk Science. Yes, I love it. I reviewed her book, and I love the title to that. And it definitely goes with my personality. And you will see how much energy affects us in our environment on a day-to-day level, including little mini black holes around us, coming and going. Okay. Now, here we've got normal female energy. Okay, this is the solar plexus chakra. There's the splenic chakra there, there's the navel. And these are meridians going through the liver, gallbladder meridian, etc. But things can change, because 8 months later, there's a secondary energy presence there, which I hope you can all see around. Head, arm or leg, nice knee there, or elbow. Could have been a footballer because of all the kicking. It later proved to be wrong. It wasn't a male footballer. As I predicted, it was a female. And here we have part of the placenta or another appendage. As you can see, at this stage, the head wasn't in the engaged position for delivery, but a couple of weeks later, the head did engage and she was turned the right way for delivery. And shall I show you what was causing this energy field? We'd like to see that? Yes? Yes? Good? Okay. Okay, babe, show me. Oh, I mean, there we are. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay. I remember my good old friend Lama Rinpoche, and he had a beautiful energy field around him, and I was photographing him left, right, and centre. He said, enough of me. Stop it, Harry. I said, well, can you think of anything more balanced I could photograph? He said, certainly. He said, it'll take the pressure off me, boy. He said, go and photograph a newborn baby, and you will see, as long as it hasn't been screamed and shouted at or got into bad habits already of this world, you will see beautiful, perfect chakras and energy flows in and around her. And he also warned me never to go out with that girl called Karma or her sister Dharma. Good advice. I never took it, but good advice. Thank you. And here, I want to introduce you to Dr. Brian Daly, my research colleague in the United States. Just to let you know that Brian comes from a very orthodox background. He won the Physician of the Ward for US of A 3 times in a row in 3 serial years. Consecutive years, yes, indeed. So he came, I'm very proud to say, he came to my clinic, which was then in London. I'm now retired from clinical practice completely, because I want to be like places like this. You see, I'm having the sort of lazy good life now in my old age. Well, actually, now I've said that, she'll probably find more work for me. I've just seen her face. Coming on seriously here, the good doctor, after speaking to many of my patients at the time in London, developed pharyngitis. So I said, right, let's get the old crystals on you, young man, and see what we can do. And we actually photographed this happening. And he's using crystal tube here. And you can actually see the energy changing around his throat in real time and around his head as that chakra becomes more open and balanced and rid of the negative energy. And here's the energy you can see passing through there. White light, glows and things coming out of the end of the crystal tube. And we'll see now, the before, there was no proper chakra to see, and there is, near enough, a perfect throat chakra. 1 minute, 10 seconds of crystal healing. There's no antibiotic that can work that fast, I assure you. Okay, and here we had worked with a technique used in India called, I'm sure many of you are aware of it, pranayama, okay, working with the energy of the breath and the prana that is in the breath, the life force. And it can be directed in inhalation, inhaling positive cosmic energy into the crystal with the breath, and then exhalation. And the frequency is completely changed to this higher vibration here, which is a shorter wavelength of light. Okay. And Dr. Brian Daly is also a Reiki master, I don't know how he fits it all in, but here, we've got him here, building up the energy in his hand and projecting it as a ball, which eventually this ball turned into a ball of white light. And here, we have him working on a patient in America with arthritis in the joints, in the legs especially, with something called Marcel Vogel crystals, okay? I personally met and was befriended by Marcel Vogel in the early 1980s. Wonderful gentleman. Worked for IBM and invented something called the liquid crystal display. Anytime you see a liquid crystal display, it's because of Marcel Vogel. But later he left conventional science because he wanted to concentrate on healing, which he knew crystals had healing properties, which he made these crystals like laser beams. There's no physical laser beam in them, but they're like beams of energy that flash and actually enter the body's own energy field, I discovered. And this is showing the meridians of the healer and one of those beams coming out of the right-hand crystal, beaming in, and some energy is flowing into the left-hand crystal, going up. So it's a circuit that was being used. And this is the before and consequent after result of that healing with the Marcel Vogel quartz crystal system, and consequence relief of inflammation and pain. And there's other things that are inside crystals. I've only got time to show you, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, the still pictures of one of these creatures, which I call the silicon entity, the quartz crystal entity. And here it is on top of a crystal. And it's quite shy, but when somebody uses the crystal for healing, as this lady did, that's the result, the expansion of this, I believe, is life form inside crystals. A lot of people believe that only life on this planet can exist in carbon-based forms. I believe that here, and even on other planets, life can exist in silicon-based life, because it has something called an interesting electrical property, quartz, silicon dioxide. It has a valency. Thank you. You guys even give refreshments. You know, I'm most impressed with you tech guys. Thank you. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much for all your help. How did they know my... lemon flavoured. How did they know my voice was going? Amazing. Of course, they wired me up with some wires, which I won't talk about earlier, ladies. Anyway, here we've got... That was for sound, by the way. And here we've got crystal energy fully formed. And these things can move around people, fly across rooms, and they are real. We have them on video. Thank you, Evie. And you can get white light, which I believe is produced by these creatures, fly out of enormous crystals like this. This was in the Monroe Institute in Blue Ridge Mountains, Virginia. Very famous institute. And these ladies and gentlemen had a friend in hospital, and they thought, I'd like to video this. And they were going to the healing crystal to beam healing energy to their friend in hospital recovering from an operation. And here they are, devoted, doing their chants and meditation, concentrating their healing force, and I'm there at a distance. Because if I got too near this crystal, it would crash the computer. So I kept my distance on a tripod, and I watched what they were doing, this devotion in their faces. And suddenly, there was a burst of energy at a certain time, and it came out, and after that, it was drawn back into the crystal. Couldn't see anything, and it was drawn back into the crystal. Maybe we could actually see that again, because it is so spectacular. Okay, here they are, and they're getting ready to synchronize their healing pulse, I think they called it. You healers out there, I know you're out there somewhere, know all about these things. I'm just a novice. I'm just a novice observer. I'm just in awe of what can be done. The crystal is acting as an amplifier for their healing force. And the white light, which was received and perceived by the person needing healing post-op, and 24 hours later, he walked out of there after a severe spinal nerve operation on his back. It was the fastest recovery that they'd ever seen. Watch for the white pulse. It happens, well, it happens at the speed of light. Completely envelops everything. And then you can see it come back into the crystal. There, drawn back in. You saw it as we saw it happen. Thank you, Evie. For the mobile, thank you for switching off your mobile phones this evening, ladies and gentlemen. You probably switched them off a little bit more when you see what's happened to this young man who was complaining of one-sided migraine-type headaches. Constantly, their young man with his phone almost like surgically cleaved to his face. And here is producing, this is the normal energy from the brain, but here, the auditory centers here, right side, is producing this mucky, brown, treacly stuff. And just to show you, it was affecting here, the back of the brain as well, where he was getting a lot of symptoms, including his eyesight sometimes getting blurred. And that was the normal side of the brain, where the telephone wasn't. So we can pick up the effects of almost any negative or positive force on the human energy field as and when it happens in real time. Thank you. This is a frightening picture, really, I have to tell you. Look at those almost demonic eyes of a crack cocaine addict. And those of you with discerning vision for pattern recognition will already see that there's half a face there with an eye, and another figure, very sinister looking figure here, and smaller shapes around. She was the only one there against the backdrop. She was not there. Her parents were outside when I took that picture. No one could have stood there next to her. And I said, you know, what? She said, well, I hear voices. They tell me to do antisocial things. They've told me to steal and murder my parents. And I won't go into it, but we tried to help her with the energy field input from the crystals. Thank you, Evie. Now here is the same girl, but this, I often associate crack cocaine where the brow chakra was completely open, the crown chakra was split in half, with also excessive kundalini stimulation. A lot of these young people can become hypersexual and not discerning. And here, at the back of the hips here, these are her slacks and these are the bottom of her legs, things. We got this circle of negative kundalini energy, which was a negative vortex, and attaching themselves to this energy, which is really, can be used for food, with other creatures that don't live quite in our realms, shall we say. And that's a conservative observation, sucking in on these energy forces. Now, of course, no one before, except clairvoyants, mystics of vision, perhaps for 1,000 years ago here in Glastonbury, and today, this tradition has been kept alive for this mystical observation of people, things, and sacred sites, which I will be going on to. Oh, this is the beautiful energy of my friend Rinpoche, and the only thing that beats it, he said, would be a newborn baby, which you've already seen. But that's all the rainbow colours around such a wonderful person. He never wanted to sustain negative thoughts internally or have them externally focused on any part of him or his environment. So, there we go. I'm giving up modelling now, so after that. So. Anyway, here we have another invention of mine called the Oldfield microscope, which goes back to 1997. And it's a way of, when we look at a microscope of any living thing, okay, it's a very uncoloured thing, especially with germs, bacteria, protozoa, etc. They lack colour. If they are plants, they have green chlorophyll in chloroplasts and granules, but that's the only colour you usually see. Now, when you want to look at any tissue under the microscope in a pathology sense, it has to be killed, stained, and fixed. Okay, killed, fixed, stained, dehydrated, rehydrated, and all going through lots and lots of complicated things. And I looked at this method and thinking of tissues and cells, etc., and I thought, there's got to be a better way of doing this. I looked at dark field, phase contrast, and I think, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And I decided we'd do it with light. We stained anything under the microscope with light. This is the result. This is my special apparatus that goes underneath a microscope, and we move around and select what we want. And here we have a very good normal rendering of a water flea. Okay, it's not really a flea, it's a relative of shrimps, Gammarus pulex in our rivers and streams. This is Daphnia, and lobsters and things like that live in the sea. But that's the same flea stained with my apparatus, still alive and well. And later on you'll see that flea's heart beating in real time and the cells around it. People think, oh, obviously an electron microscope is better because it shows much bigger images. But I'm sorry, you can't look at living things with an electron microscope Because first of all, they're in a vacuum and coated with various layers of molecular metals to withstand the electronic bombardment that happens in the vacuum to bring the electrons to focus on a phosphorus screen. But here, the animal stays alive and well. That microscope has gone around the world in researchers' hands, and I was nominated for fellowship to the Royal Microscopy Society some years ago because of this. There's the heart, everybody. And it has only 2 chambers with a deviated sort of septum through the middle there. 2 chambers, unlike our 4 chambers in our hearts. Look at the individual cellular components you can see around there. Muscles and cells of other tissues. In real time, we're not hurting the creature at all. We're just illuminating it with our special apparatus. And for the, I know it's not today, but for the hay fever sufferers amongst you, sometimes people like with microscopy to identify the pollen grains individually. This is what an ordinary microscope sees without chemical staining. But here, with my light staining, instantly on this glycerin preparation, you can see the pollen grains and the shape and the patterns to identify the species. That picture should really get up your nose. And here, okay, not on the wings of a dove, but the wings of a wasp, we have what an ordinary microscope sees here, of this one specimen, and then after I have put it through my apparatus. Thank you, Evie. And that's top and bottom. And it's so good, you can actually discern a 3-dimensional rendering of the surface. Down at high magnifications and looking at the hairs, we discovered that the hairs on winged insects, okay, are spiral. And I thought, what on earth could this be for? And then I found out from a gentleman who was Callum Coates, who was in Australia at the time, an expert on vortex energy and Scherberger's work, etc. It's all written in beautiful Nexus magazines out there at the back, later in the back of the auditorium. And that if air is passing over a spiral, it creates micro vortices, which creates uplift, okay, on the top of the wing. They're not under the wing, but top of the wing. So they can fly through, turbulent air and all sorts of things that planes can't do, even helicopters comfortably. And so if you ever see in the future, coming out of British Aerospace or somewhere like that, a furry wing, you know they took my idea. Okay. They made dinosaurs furry, haven't they? You noticed? Or feathery, anyway, feathery. Now here, we have a beautiful creature called a slime mold. I am very, very fond of this life form, ladies and gentlemen. I've called her Matilda because she's always working down under, in honor of my Australian friends. And the beautiful thing, can you see these little circles on the agar plate here? She's moving towards. And where she touches, she envelops these little circles. And those are Escherichia coli, bacteria-growing colonies in an agar dish. She has the most wonderful appetite for all pathogenic bacteria that I've been able to put down here. And she's like a huge, giant amoeba that you can see with your eyes. She is magnified here, macro photography. And she has a bloodstream that doesn't conduct any blood, it conducts cytoplasm. She has DNA material, all evenly distributed through her whole body, her slime body. And you can break off bits of her, and each one of those little bits will grow into a bigger slime mold. Yes, indeed. I just want you to know that all my exes remind me that of being so slimy. I have now actually proved it to these females now after all these years. My complete interest in these slime molds. There we are. Yes, indeed. I was once nearly arrested, ladies and gentlemen, and I was fishing down my road, down a manhole cover with a test tube on the end of my fishing line, my fishing stool, and I was after human effluent fluid. I know my father always said I would end up if I didn't work in a job like that. Quite right, madam, you say. But in this wonderful, wonderful fluid is a richness of something called phages. Now, phages are viruses that actually predate on bacteria. Funny to think that, you know, bacteria actually have their own viruses. And I was after these phages to show them in my microscope, working on killing bacteria. By the way, Matilda, I'm impregnating into a bandage to where eventually one day when it gets approved by some medical authority, long probably after I'm dead, that it will go for MSA and gangrenous gas-producing bacteria and gangrene bacteria, etc. And as you can see here, the Simode has got rid of it. Everything. Okay. Oh yes, yes, almost arrested. Thank you, Evie. I was almost arrested. I was just fishing away merrily, as you do. Fishermen amongst you, I'm sure, will be sympathetic with this story. And suddenly, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't expecting this. A panda car, just in my own street, just pull up beside me, and 2 young men, they look like schoolboys, shows you my age, got out the car. And said, hello, sir, what are you doing? I explained to them, I'm a fellow of the Royal Microscopical Society. I'm here at the end of the tube here, and I'm trying to get a good sample of rich human effluent, and I'm going to spin it down in a centrifuge, isolate the phages. I'm then going to inoculate my bacteria plates and look for plaques, empty spaces of where those phages have eaten those bacteria. And I hope it's going to be some use in some time for treatment for humanity. The Russians are already doing it, you know. We don't want to get there before the Russians do it, gentlemen. And they look quite startled. It's quite sad to see big burly policemen looking scared. And the senior one turned to the youngster and said, are you going to write this up? And they silently got back into the car and drove off, but before they did, the senior officer rolled down the window and said, excuse me, sir, will you make sure you do put the cover back, as it could be dangerous to people walking on the pavement in the morning. And they drove off like the clappers. And here, my microscope can also view live blood, okay? Not dead blood, but live blood. This was published in this paper of my own manufacture up here. Okay, live blood analysis. And the beautiful thing about this is that we've got our own amoebas in our body. Okay, they're part of our lymphocyte and leukocyte and all our white cells and T cells. And they move around the body like amoebas, scavenging on, there's 2 here, 1 down here, 1 down here, 1 down here. This is live footage of them scavenging through this blood sample, looking for any parasites or invaders. Here it is, showing you that it is alive and working. That person had a very good immune system. And here is sorry to go on about this, but another invention of mine, which is a microscope that doesn't use lenses, okay? It's a projection microscope that's only using a special laser. And if you look very carefully, there's no lenses involved at all. I'm just putting it through the specimen at special angles and special refractive indexes. You'll see these germs, which are by 6 foot by 6 foot, as big as this screen, moving across the plane. There we are. It's a very small bacteria. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, I won't be bugging you for much longer on this subject. Going on to other subjects. Okay, Evie, thank you. Yes, I think a very, very appropriate title for Glastonbury is paranormal photography, using another invention of mine called the Oldfield filter. And do we have the device. Yep. And all you have to do, this is the Oldfield filter, ladies and gentlemen, to try and see if you can get anything similar to what I'm going to be showing you in a few minutes. And you have your digital camera or ordinary camera, and you put it, this is Evie's camera, so I've got to find a, oh, thank you. My technical assistant, as always. Yeah, she even helps me put on my seatbelt in a plane, because sometimes I'm a nervous flyer. I want that fur on the wings sooner rather than later of any aircraft. And I hate turbulent air. And I can't show you, but basically you'll be seeing things made with this filter by just simply putting it in front of a camera lens and doing an appropriate snap. Without flash, by the way. Okay. And you can record some very interesting phenomena. Right, the phantom leaf effect, which you remember before. I think we'll move on. So we're taking it further to where if you remove the whole human being, is what I'm trying to say, you will get something left behind, an energy remnant. Even if that physical body is completely destroyed, there is something left behind. Okay. And here, I was asked to do some work with a medical examiner in a mortuary situation. And I was with a clairvoyant who told me where to point my PIP camera and my other cameras. And this blank wall produced a figure of a spirit entity with his mouth open here, holding a staff across. It looked a bit like a Joseph of Arimathea figure, actually, being so close to the Tor. I hope that St. Joseph will not mind me mentioning this, that I think it's very... It wasn't him, but a being called Angelos, who explained to the psychic, spiritually, that he was a collector of souls. Because when people are in a discorporated situation suddenly, especially young people, they are confused. For example, on a battlefield, a soul collector will be sent in a uniform or with a rallying flag or light to bring these young souls across into the light. This is what this figure, this spiritual entity, was explaining to the lady medium I was with. Okay? Then I went looking for other forms of energetic presences, especially in haunted areas. This is a shrouded figure that I came in Yorkshire. There she is, this shrouded figure here, draped over a tombstone. I better tell you how I got there. Can you see also this mausoleum in the background here? Yeah? And this statue and that thing, that doesn't exist as well as the ghost. It doesn't exist in this world. It's from another century. And I was told that there could be some very interesting phenomena in this graveyard, so I went with my special camera and looking around there, and suddenly I saw up ahead, and it wasn't even Halloween, what I thought was a child covered in a bedsheet pretending to be a ghost. And I said, "Hey, little kid, you don't scare me. No, 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 no." You know, I can get down to their level sometimes, you know. It may surprise you. And I'm very popular with little kids especially. They seem to understand me somehow. Yeah. Anyway, so I saw the ghost, as it turned out to be, and I said, "Well, come on, stop fooling around, you know, take that thing off you." And it started to move away. The figure started to move away. And then I became my scientific, serious observer. Because when someone moves, I'll move across the rostrum. I'll exaggerate this. There's a movement, a gait to that movement. There's no smoothness about a human walk. Not even ballerinas can do this. But she was gliding, and I could see underneath the shroud. So I started to give chase to the figure, and I chased it through the tombstones, and being British, I'm always polite, and I said, excuse me, could you please stand still, because I want to photograph the phenomena, I want to photograph you." And she seemed to understand my local colloquial English, because she draped herself and posed at this tombstone. And I said, "Well, no one's going to believe me, even if this shot comes out. I'm going to change the angle of the shot." I said, "Look, still stay in that position, but I'm going to change my angle, dear, okay? Stay where you are." I'd watched David Bailey, you know, they're very polite people as well. Hold that position, and I changed the angle, Oh, you changed it. So can you show the previous angle? Sorry, she's already changed it. There. That's my wide angle. Okay. Then I changed the camera angle to that, and she was still in the same position. And when I went back the next day to look for all the place, I was looking for little footprints and everything the next day. It hadn't rained or anything. Being my usual detective scientist mode, couldn't find anything. And the cemetery attendant said, "What are you doing, sir? Looking for a grave?" I said, "No, I'm looking for what looked like a mausoleum here." And I described it to him. "Oh," he said, "there was something here on this site I've seen in the old records 200 years ago, time of the Napoleonic Wars." Then, of course, I went to the best historical place of information I could, the local watering hole, the public house in the area. And after lubricating a few people's glasses with the amber nectar, I found out that a young woman had been reported in the during Napoleonic times to have been chased in there by a jealous lover and bayoneted with his musket through the heart for marrying another, because she thought, you know, he was dead. And her spirit is supposed to roam there. Anyway, you'd be pleased to know I had a word with some of my medium spiritual healer friends, and they sent a rescue mission. And since then, the young woman has not been heard or seen that manifestation since. Thank you. Now, this can also happen with now with the use of video phones. Sorry, what they're called. Mobile phones. Thank you, thank you. Maybe I've made the next leap to the future. But here, got a couple of young Filipino girls, and they're posing here, and their friend is taking their picture outside a nightclub. Where are ghosts? Okay, where are phantasms and spirits left over? Well, they're not always there. She was there because she was killed in the graveyard, okay? But where people are, where there's aggregations of people, nightclubs, pubs, sports events, you know, where there is activity and a lot of human energy. And here, they were only taken together. There was not a third person there. You can see holding her arm is another presence. And you can see this spatial distortion as this being has come from another dimension, lowered their vibrations to be able to be photographed. As they do, by the way. Yes. Thank you. Now, I've also been in where this happens professionally, in the rooms of mediums that, contact the dead. Never order a steak there because it always turns out medium. And you'll be well done after this lecture, I can tell you. You'll sleep well tonight. Oh, yes. And here, this was done with very low light photography. But here with our filter, we got orbs and energy moving out of, this is the medium, blacked out for, privacy. And here from one of his sisters, this white light. But can you see just here, you can just make it out at half a face here, and this energy here, halfway through the table. Well, that figure, that being, is not in the room. It was somebody they were communicating with. Thank you, Evie. And so we looked at this, so we did a research project on these very, very profound individuals with these gifts. And I photographed this physical transfiguration medium as she went into a trance with our PIP, polycontrast interference photography. And we saw white light descending into her. And then once the white light entered the body, she transfigured herself and turned the face of a man. In fact, at one stage she even grew a beard. Yes. And here is the growth of the beard that we photographed. And the hair changed and everything, completely. Turned in a completely different face. There's only a very low red light, but I show you, I checked everything. There was no sleight of hand going on. There was no makeup artist in the back suddenly coming out and doing the old business on her. She changed like that instantly, as soon as this white light from behind her and descended and took her over, as she said to me afterwards. And another interesting energy that used to be around an old friend of mine was of my late cat, Barbie. And Barbie was very special. When she was with me in clinic, people would often say, "Where's the cat? Never mind the crystals. Can the cat sit on my lap, Harry? We get so much from that cat." And then a healer said to me, I think it was Rose Gladden, she said, "You know your cat, Harry? It's surrounded with the most beautiful emerald green energy field. and often associated with sort of chi energy from China, the golden jade healing ray. And it's associated with dragons. And if you knew my late cat's nature, dragon was the operative word. Okay? Because if you disturbed her from a seat like this, she always picked the best chair in the house. I'm losing my headgear. Excuse me, ladies. You know the feeling sometimes when your headgear goes. And here, surrounding her is this, as predicted, taken with my optical filter, available after the lectures and tomorrow, by the way, from the organisation. You will see this wonderful whirlpool of green, balancing, healing energy around her. And she was wonderful. People thought there was nothing from the crystals, it was all down to the cat. Maybe, we never know. Healing did continue after her passing though. And it's interesting because I have to tell you a story of, won't go into it, but I had a near-death experience where I was being asphyxiated in an empty house once, all alone, a gas leak anomaly, and I was walking towards a white light, seeing, as you do, dead friends and relatives. It's absolutely true. And I saw my father up ahead, and I started to speed up my walk towards my father, and he's doing this thing, like, get back. It was always like when, you know, I was bowling him or trying to get him out at cricket, he'd always move me back because I was getting too close to stump him and unsportsman's things like that. And I said, what are you doing? I want to have a word with you. You know, a few things I want to talk to you about. And this is in this dream. I'm walking towards this white light, and suddenly I hear meow, 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 meow. And you know, she was half Siamese, Barbie, okay? And it was a caterwauling that would wake the dead. And in this case, it woke the half-dead. That was me. And I suddenly woke up in my armchair from nowhere in the middle of the night, early hours of the morning, and I couldn't get up from it. I was dizzy. I was looking for my dead cat Barbie. She died 2 years previously. And there was an enormous leak going on in the house. And I called the emergency services, etc. And he was making out his report, the gaffer, and he said, excuse me, sir, but, you know, how did you discover the leak occurring in the residence we've just been... I said, well, I was asleep in the house and something woke me up. I didn't tell any lies, never tell any lies. And he looked at me most strangely, he said, well, I'm glad, Governor, that something woke you up, because if there hadn't, you would have woken up certainly dead in the morning. And I'm telling this story in America, but this is getting to the crescendo here. I'm telling this story in America to the Americans. And they like a good story there, by the way. You know, look at their last president, you know. Got to have my little dig around the bush, you understand. Beat around the bush. And here, someone's taking, with their camera and a filter, a picture of me on the rostrum, as some people have done this evening. Thank you very much. The gentleman over there with his camera, I think. Thank you. And you never know what may come out on it, because here was the most enormous orb. And if you look very carefully in there, I'm going to show you ears, nose, little mouth, and even whiskers. And I've looked at that most carefully under magnification, and that is the frontal face of my deceased cat, Barbie. So she appeared in this enormous orb to say, Dad, I'm still around, you know. And one thing I've learned over the years, as I get older, it's comforting. You can't bury love in a box. It's eternal, ladies and gentlemen. I think I can be forgiven for saying that in this wonderful holy town of yours, and spiritual town, and this spiritual company, that love is eternal. And if one thing that you want to, don't worry about bank accounts and pensions and things like that. Store up your category of love, not just with people, but with every living thing that you can touch and it can relate to you. I've even had microscopic life, like my slime mold, Matilda, change direction because I wanted her to move over into a particular gradient of the side. Well, I wanted to take a particular measurement of a pseudopodium. That means a false foot, by the way, to non-initiated. Indeed. Okay. This is a real podium, by the way. You know. Oh, yes, I'm here. Getting ahead of myself here. Ooh, I have to get ahead of myself, ladies and gentlemen. Here we have the old site of the chopping block at the Tower of London. Okay? And I was told there are lots of things floating about there. Go there with your filter, Harry. You're going to see a lot of things. My other psychical research friend has told me. They've seen a lot with their eyes, so I went with my camera. So I went to the side of this scaffold, and I thought, well, there's not going much on. There's just a memento there at the Tower Green bit. Tower Green, I think it is. And here, you know, where the scaffold was. And I said to myself inside, looking through the camera, I wonder what it looked like when it was built. Now, as soon as I put that out to the universe, an answer came back in energy. Because there's the site, and of course, usually I've turned my camera to a different angle to get another aspect ratio. A post appears, not of a person, a phantasm of a post. Okay? And I thought, oh, it can't be. But I've got to get this photographed at a higher angle. So I raced across the courtyard and suddenly realized I was being chased by a group of Japanese tourists, probably wanting to know where this eccentric Englishman was going with his camera. So I was running up the tower steps and popping my camera against the window, which they're all behind me, trying to take pictures without my filter, by the way. Nothing would show up. You know. Anyway, I had my filter there, and here is the energy field of the scaffold where royalty and nobility had scaffolds built for them, knew every time their heads were going to be removed in the usual British way. Most politely, because it was done by English executioners, of course. Keep the French and their swords, that's what I say. Anyway, historians amongst you, take note. Shall I go on? Yes, indeed. Anyway, here, stop, she says, right? Here we've got the scaffold and the energy that was descending from higher realms into the ground there around the enclosure. And I think I've looked at historical artist impressions of these scaffolds. I did my research, and it's very similar in dimensions to what would have held the priest, a couple of executioners' assistants, and maybe some, and of course the oglers would have been around the outside. Yes, don't want to Henry VIII on any more about that. Yes, indeed. Method of divorce was very sharp with Henry, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, right. Now, as well as people that have been unwell and under pressure, I have looked at sick buildings, okay? And here we had a lady who I was treating for her nerves with the electrocrystal system. And it would be a question of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. And I would only get her recovered to a certain level. And I said, what is the root of your nervousness and, you know, cat on hot tin roof syndrome, as I call it? Somerset Maugham, you know, wonderful writer. Oh, yes. Where was I? Oh, right, okay. So I was invited. She said, my house is haunted. So I said, right, I'll come with my camera and we'll see what's haunting you, shall we? Please do, please do. So I turned up, and she says, when I sit down in the evenings in this settee, this is her office there, and it's all scrunched up. No one could stand here, by the way. I'm telling you that now. She said, out of nowhere, I'll feel a cool breeze coming from my right, and an invisible hand, I feel, will grab me. Oh, I said, that's not very nice. So let's see if I can. She said, yeah, I will see. So I had my camera there with my lens, and as you can see, the invisible hand turned up, grabbed her, she screamed and ran out the room. Right, I thought, you so-and-so. You know, disturbing a lovely English lady like this in her Tudor home. I'll sort you out. This is what I said to myself. And I made this announcement. You may be very good at bullying ladies and frightening children. She had children, by the way, that had been frightened in the past with this thing. But try and scare me. Mistake. Don't do this. Because this is what happened. We saw this monk-like figure against the white wall appear when I challenged it, and I went closer, snapping away, and I got too close, and I felt this invisible punch go into my stomach. Into my stomach, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I did what any brave Englishman would do. I've said this in Australia, and they respected me for it. I screamed, dropped the camera, and ran to find the lady of the house. Who immediately, in the good old English tradition, made me a fine cup of English tea. Being suitably brave again, we went in to face the entity once more. And this time she said, well, you probably antagonized it. Try and be more polite, Harry. And I said, right, excuse me. I said, whoever's here, we want to find out more about what's worrying you and what you're doing to disturb this family. Can you please show yourself, please, please, in your true form? And I apologize for what happened earlier. You must apologize, being British, always. Even when you haven't done anything wrong. I find it helps, especially when you're in America. Okay, and as you can see, the discarnate entity fully manifested. Now, I have to tell you, it's very low light, okay, too much light disturbs. But here, we can make out the face of a young youth with long hair, we believe, a waistcoat, frilled sleeves, and hands moving. I'm sorry about the lights being here, they're losing contrast a little bit on the screen. But lights coming up like this, as if to say, go no further, come no further, close to me with that infernal device. And I later found out from mediums they were meaning the camera. I was seen as a one-eyed monster with my Nikon F reflex camera. Beautiful camera. One of the best cameras ever made. Of course, there's the Hasselblad 500 CM. Yeah, I'll carry on. Anyway, you need a good camera. Now, with digitals, you can get even further and more sensitivity with the lower ASA levels. I was using something like 800 ASA film in these days. But there's the film, hands coming up to say, come no further. And we backed off. And then I said, well, later on another day, I said, where else do you get these manifestations? You see things and feel things. She said, upstairs in the drawing room, there's a long settee. Against that are mirrors, which reflect into the room. And sometimes the children are scared by things, and myself too, with what they see in the mirror. They've seen other children and other people. And if you look very carefully, ladies and gentlemen, here I am with the lady of the house. There's her dress, her legs. There's me, and I'm shooting a picture through my filter of the image in the mirror. Okay? That's to orientate you around this. And if you look very carefully, here there's this mahogany table, thick-set mahogany table, with a silver candelabra. Okay, can you clearly see that? Here, remember the youth had ruffs on his sleeves, because it was 17th century, we found out this haunting was coming from another time and another place. And here, the ruff on the sleeve, okay, with the hand coming out the mirror that often came out and touched people on the settee if they were sitting watching the television. All that antique stuff in the room does not exist now. It's from the past, when that old Tudor building had belonged to a family of 3 generations wiped out. Grandparents, parents and children of the Black Death in the 1600s. The 1665 or 1666. I always get the Black Death and the Fire of London muddled up. Anyway, you historians out there will sort it out, I'm sure. And basically, the whole 3 generations were trapped. As far as they were concerned, it was their house still. And the modern people were the invaders. And when I was coming with my this sort of devilish device for camera, they saw this Cyclops character coming towards them, and they were lashing out. You know, the children were being mischievous by touching what they thought were ghosts from their time, which were the modern people and the modern children. Yeah. And speaking of family groups, of children and families, you know, you wouldn't expect to see discarnate entities in family group pictures, would you? Well, here we're doing a family group picture in Iceland of an energy of a family, collective energy, and they are past members that come in, and that was identified as a past female member of that family by the older family members, with the shape of the energy and the face and everything. And that is the eyes, the hairdo, the mouth line, the chin, the clothing is even spiritual. Yeah, people say, well, why aren't you photographing ghosts as they should be, completely naked? And you know what my answer was to these people, skeptics? I said, don't you think God can afford clothes for them? Actually, it wasn't original. Joan of Arc said that to the British inquisitors and of the church when she was being questioned about her voices and her angels. They were clothed, okay? By the way, this grey suit I particularly disturbed the Americans with, because they say, why are you British so drab and formal? I said, well, you're joking on yours coming to America. Check out the lining. In particular with golfers, it gets up their nose. I love it. Anyway, to plough on through the fairway, I was invited in America to this healing sanctuary with my camera and filter. These filters are available to anybody now who wants them, by the way. I want this research to be duplicated all over the world. It's a window to these other dimensions. And here, my filter in front of the camera, and the healer said to me, well, my spirit guides have invited you, Harry, to come and watch me heal, and they're going to make an appearance, and they'll be in the picture. So I said, what's in it for me? She said, oh, it'll be a nice brunch, and you know, anything you want to drink, and beers, and yeah, on. I said, you know, I don't come cheap. I asked the organisers here. Oh, I hope we're going to buy me a beer later. Anyway, but anyway, I took this picture and saw what looks like this. Can you see this young figure here in a white habit, a young man profile, long chin with red hair? And before I showed her the picture, I said, describe to me what your spirit guides look like in your healing work. Oh, she said, well, I have a young novice nun that died on the wagon train over here in the 1900s, and also a young boy killed by frontier Indians, and he's got flaming red hair. She described these two figures to a T. She hadn't seen the picture. Thank you. And we can see some other wonderful things with our filters. This standing, beautiful, cascading rainbow of light that seems to be coming from the direction of this adoring, glamorous grandmother to her grandchild was photographed by me with the lovely Everly there and her lovely grandchild. And it was absolutely fantastic. I've never been able to reproduce it. That's unfortunate with certain phenomena. There was that right moment of capture, and it was just right. There is something called the light of love. I truly believe that now. That was all done without flash, sir. Most indefinitely. Because, not that you can't take flash photography with my filters, but people say, well, it's bounced around and there's reflection in the lenses. You know, one has one's critical skeptics, that's quite right. They keep me in check somehow, you know. Not very well, I'm pleased to say. I'm no orthodox scientist, by the way. I'm too fringe, I'm too out on the limb. And that's how I liked it, because that's how I climbed trees as a youngster. And I've stuck out to the same system ever since. Next, please. Yes, 5 minutes. Oh, the evening's just gone by. Okay, I'll try. Can we skip the vortices and go straight to the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull? I know it'd be the right subject. Vortices and haunted rooms, Bosnian pyramids with flying saucers going in and out of the shot, and next is Pyramid of the Sun. Research in the USA, I'll go quickly through. Here I am, and the night before I was in the spirit with this young man here who held up with the Jack Daniels better than I did. Here at the Monroe Institute we have the Faraday cage where I did all these experiments, operating, looking at a contact with the other side in the Faraday cage. That was without anybody. That's with the medium, Dr. Daly in this case, and there's a vortex that opened up with a face. This Dr. Daly identified as his discarnate passed on brother, now in spirit, and he always had a signature of putting his head to the side. And of course it was in a Faraday cage, so there was nothing could have come in from outside or anything. The Jefferson Institute, where a slave was said to have been hung from a tree using my filter, and there we have the most beautiful colour orb. Gettysburg, okay, where I went hunting for the glorious dead, especially for men of the South. Men of Robert E. Lee's during Gettysburg. Do you know that Great Britain supported the South in the Great Civil War? They also gave arms to the North as well. But, you know, you've got to hedge your bets, haven't you? But here we have, just like the Gulf War now, and anywhere else I can think of. I do hate war, by the way. But here we have a soldier with proper battlefield Southern-style hat, loading what looks like a musket. Here's an arm, here's fingers on a musket, and a kind of tunic with a scarf. And later on, I didn't get it on film, but he pointed this rifle at me through the camera. But when I captured it, it was nothing on the film. But that's just an image of him on the battlefield, still fighting what he thinks are Yankees. I'm so surprised I got, mistaken for a Yankee, I can tell you. Anyway, here we have some Union soldier ghosts, which I photographed. And there's the hat and everything. Only half manifest. Below the post there, you won't see any legs. Sometimes they only have energy to manifest part of a body. You can see a foot in a haunted spot, a hand will suddenly appear. Doesn't mean they're they only got hands. It only means they've had the energy into this world to manifest parts. And, I seem to attract the attention of UFO flying vehicles whenever I'm doing a lot of this work. And they're flying in the sky there during this video. I hope they're learning a lot anyway. There they are. There's it's completely blue sky. Nothing there to be seen. But what my PIP system does is able to see phase changes in light. And things that are cloaked and invisible can become visible. Okay. Thank you, Evie. And here we have a haunted church in Rochester, New York, figure on the stairs in an envelope of light and some orbs there. Okay. There's the lovely Evie next to the haunted piano. I wasn't going to go near a haunted piano where things are said to happen. So send the girl in is my advice, the gentleman, send the younger person in to take the shot. And then I took the shot and she started to disappear in the shot. In fact, here is Dr. Claude Swanson, one of America's top physicists who befriended me, and I befriended him. We've swapped real way out theories on physics, by the way. You lot are really not here, quantum physical wave formations and things. Okay. But anyway, as you can see, with the Oldfield filter, the good doctor's not there either. He's lost his head. Okay. Showing movement into other dimensional flows that come through this reality all the time, and that's how we see phantasms and things from other dimensions and other universes. Okay? Yep, okay. Oh, please, can we just show them Stonehenge? Please, please, please. Andy, forgive me if I'm going over time. 5 minutes. Oh, great. I've dilated time. Claude Swanson's right. It was 5 minutes, half an hour ago. Great. Okay, so we have some sacred sites. Niagara Falls. This goes down well in America. Please. Fast. Yeah. No, I want them to see it. Because the Native American people told me there, the First Nation people, if you were to go with your camera, Harry, at the bottom of Niagara, there is a vortex of energy that is a channel into another world, into the spirit world. So I went there, of course, as you do, to try and photograph it. Yeah, and I caught it. And there's the vortex at the bottom of the falls. There's no whirlpool, okay? It's in energy form. Dr. Brian Daly was with me, and he was showing me that it's tradition that Englishmen climb into a special barrel for good luck. I did decline, because there was no beer in it. It was completely empty with a funny little chair. I ask you, these Americans. Oh. Anyway, here we come. Different filters I'm using, looking at different wavelengths of energy. I'm going to charge the group for another hairdo after this. Gosh, it's just pinching a little. Okay, and there's the vortex. Okay, there we are. Nicely captured. Thank you, Evie. Move on. Yeah. Stonehenge. How many people here, hands up, have been to that wonderful site, Stonehenge? Oh, nearly the whole blooming audience. Excellent. Would you agree, like you are now, that what you're looking at, to look at the person next to you, do you think they're solid? Do you think they're real? Okay, look at these stones. Oldfield filter, you can see straight behind them. Read, if you can get translations of Tacitus, one of the recordists of the Romans, invading the British Isles for Julius Caesar. They were scared to death of the Druids, with good reason. Because these places and the Druids who knew about the legends and could wield the energy of these places could devastate the Romans on psychic and spiritual fronts because of what they were doing. That's why they were chased all the way to Anglesey to be exterminated. By the way, this is not fiction. You can read it in the history books. And the recordings of Tacitus said that they observed, Roman soldiers observed druids walking through solid stones. Walking through stones, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I didn't believe that fairy story, I thought, until I saw this. Here we have a vortex of energies that we photographed over the standing stones at Stonehenge. And by the way, the sun's not up there. These beams of light were somehow forming a pyramid of energy. The sun is way over here. It's morning. That's the noonday position. Those are not beams of light from the sun. They're from somewhere else, invisible. Then I switched to a different filter, and then I saw the pyramid. Here we are. And it transects and goes into the stones. Anyone doing research at Stonehenge, especially connected with Druid tradition, I hope they'll find this useful. And I will share certain pictures with them to prove any spiritual points they may have. And here we have vortices coming between stones, going up. And here we have this configuration, like an early physics cyclotron, like a collider. But they knew about vortex and colliding energy long before the physicists of our modern day era. I also have concern about CERNs, by the way. Wink, wink, nod, nod to the physicists in the audience. Right, the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull, and yes, I know, 5 more minutes only left, according to my, thought I'd try it, Andy. Sorry, I thought I'd try it. Okay, here we have vortex of energy moving around the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull. Okay, and actually I got too close to this thing. You see the pixelation? That was before my camera was burned out. The microchip was completely sizzled by it. I'm glad nothing else of mine was sizzled. You'd be pleased to know. Anyway, the circular vortex of energy. Oh, I've actually run out of laser energy. Come on, energize. And it's going around here. These black particles of particulate energy are circulating in a vortex. Next one, please. I also observed a meditation with the skull later that evening, and I noticed, when using the same filter on my system, that the people who were enjoying the meditation with the skull were also being infiltrated with this particulate energy. By the way, you'll see some people there that are not taking part in the meditation, and those particles of energy are not entering them. Oh, people say, what does this all mean? And I absolutely, emphatically and frankly say, I don't know at the moment. Okay? I'll probably spend the rest of my life trying to find out what I saw. And here, I was very, very, very privileged. This is the last video footage, by the way, everyone will be pleased to know, I'm sure, of the skull on a table with the owner, and he's going to do a cleansing. Now, as he was getting ready for the cleansing, another energy field, like another skull, appeared under this table, and it filled with white light. Later, this white light went to the skull, which he was cleansing after lots of people have far past it, and after the meditation. This white light comes into the skull, and then eventually into him. And he actually Bill turns into a being of white light. I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see it. Here we are. Here's the white light now coming into the plinth on which the crystal is. You see all these patterns of energy. Well, I've seen patterns like that before in a real human head, okay? That looks like, to me, like a movement of living brain energy. And even eyes, can you see? And even like a mouth. But this is a crystal skull. Okay, there's not a real head on there. But he knows there's a being that enters this skull to communicate and heal with him. And this white light from the skull goes up and up and up. Halfway through, and we start to see his solar plexus start to energize in a moment as it receives white light. He'd been so depleted, he told me, with so many things that I think this was helping to energize him. This cleansing process of the skull actually is reciprocated to him. There's the solar plexus chakra, okay, suddenly appearing from him. His hands are always, and then suddenly the white light increases. And then I suddenly see white light appearing in his head. It's traveling up his body, And then, like you saw from the crystal there, the burst of white light out of it, this was the burst of white light energy inside himself. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Glastonbury, I hope I've been able to keep you entertained for the very long evening. I really do appreciate your great patience in my wonderful investigation into my and your invisible universe. Thank you.
Harry Oldfield, thank you very much indeed.